Alright, so the plan for starting things off in Standard is basically going to be... That's definitely how we spell control. I think Edgar Charmed Groom has a decent chance of being a really strong mid-range card against the various green and red aggressive decks right now. And I think that's kind of where I want to begin Brewing Esper. And then from there, see if the mana base functions. I suspect it should, because the mana base was mostly functional in Alchemy, and in all honesty, the standard mana base, the only difference is Forsaken Crossroads, and I wasn't 1,000,000% sold on that card anyway, so functionally it ought to still work, probably. So let's say we play Edgar and Sorin's as some number of 4-drops. We got Memory Deluge. And potentially this might be too many 4-drops to the extent that I'm almost not entirely certain if the deck wants Sorin, other than that I think that's probably a good card to have against various black mid-range decks. So maybe that's a sideboard card. But I'm kind of suspicious that I'm on wanting to play 4 Disdainful Strokes between the 75. And then maybe 4 Vanishing Verse, and how close do I want to try to be to Esper in Alchemy? 4 Memory Deluge is already a pretty big difference, to be entirely honest. We could try to play Parasitic Grasp as a removal spell. I'm kind of interested in that as an anti-mono white option. And then we could try to play Meathook as a board wipe, although I don't know if that's super synergistic with Charmed Groom. I guess it's not awful. We could even play... what's the Foretell board wipe? Doomscar is also an option alongside Meathook Massacre. Horror is probably the best into the game win condition, I imagine. Maybe. Some of that's only 21 cards, but that feels like a whole deck. What are we missing? 3-drops, I guess. What 3-drops are actually playable in Esper these days? Come to think of it, what exactly did Esper in Alchemy look like? I've got one of those decks sitting around somewhere, right? No, because they just got a bunch of stuff tweaked and banned. Okay, so this was one version of Esper. It had a bunch of Leer. Divide by Zero was the only 3-drop. Okay. Huh. Huh. What kind of 1-mana interaction do we have if we don't want to go for Leer as card advantage? Although, maybe I'm still supposed to try to go for Leer, even without Divide by Zero? If we wanted to try to still do Leer, is there any playable instant speed stuff in Esper that's 3 or less mana? What kind of instance do we even have access to? There's Fateful Absence, but I'm not super excited about that. There's Valorous Stance, I guess, sort of does the Protect Leer thing. The Disdainful Stroke Leer plan is not a good plan. So I'm not super excited about that. I guess Doomscar plus Leer is sort of a combo with Fading Hope, but Fading Hope and Doomscar aren't combos. You could try to play Consider with Leer as more card advantage, I guess. That also kind of plays with Hullbreaker Horror as an option. We definitely have Jwari Disruption that I would probably want to play. Thirst for Discovery isn't playable in a 3-color deck. Huh. Oh, Divide by Zero is such a good card, and it's going to be so hard to replace. Goodness gracious. Not excited about Power Word Kill. Ugh. Siphon Insight? Is that, like, playable at all? I guess Soul Shatter probably is. I really don't want to play Siphon Insight. That doesn't sound... Yowzers, there's not a lot of options. Huh. Okay, well, what are our non-instant options that might pull us away from Leer, but give us a different sort of control mid-range, maybe, plan? I mean, this is still more of a control deck than a mid-range deck, but maybe we need some threats that are closer to mid-rangey threats. I'm concerned about making sure this deck has ways to beat the grindy snow decks. I think having access to Vanishing Verse helps that, but Go Blank is still a card that is extremely efficient at fighting Memory Deluge and Leer. And I would want to be able to board into something that isn't as just totally blindsided by that. What does that look like? What does that look like? Ideally, stuff that's 3 mana would fit the curve best. Skyclave Apparition's not very exciting. A Wedding Announcement I don't think is exciting without sacrifice outlets. Jacob Halkin? But how likely are they to have removal anyway? Still, I guess that has potential as a sideboard card. I'm kind of interested. Malevolent Hermit is going to be a heck of a card out of dragons. I have no idea how to fight that. Making their stuff uncounterable and countering our spells does a lot to fight a Disdainful Stroke game plan, and I don't have access to Spikefield Hazard? That's troubling. Suspicious Stowaway doesn't really fight dragons super well, because the problem of dragons still having eggs exists. But I guess maybe... I mean, they even have Spikefield Hazard. I could hope dragons... Well, I mean, so Suspicious Stowaway doesn't really answer dragons. And it probably doesn't answer any kind of black mid-range list with Go Blank, but it is a way to diversify into cards that don't get just destroyed by graveyard hate, I suppose. Honeyflying goes well. Why Edgar? Because I think initially there's probably going to be a strong push towards mono green, with Chariot and Ren and 7 being just a top tier deck. The thing that really was keeping that from being the strongest default thing to be doing was mostly that it was difficult for Ren and 7 decks to scale up to Ren and 7, but still have a plan that was actually fast enough against Alrund's Epiphany. And without Alrund's Epiphany being the bottle on that strategy, I think the only other thing that stops Chariot and Ren and 7 nonsense is good, cheap blockers into Hullbreaker Horror. And I think Edgar is probably the best card for dirtling effectively against green and buying time for your other removal to make up for green's just infinite ability to put stuff onto the board for, like, free. More or less. I'm still baffled by the fact that Divide by Zero got banned. That seems so wildly unnecessary, but it is the world we live in, so I will try to figure out what exactly you're supposed to do to make Control viable without that gone. Or with that gone, rather. Mid-rangey, mid-rangey, mid-rangey. We can still play it in Alchemy, but apparently this weekend is a standard PTQ. So that's kind of what I want to try to get some ideas out ahead of. I mean, we could try to sideboard into Go Blanks, I guess. That is a game plan against Blood on the Snow lists. Whether that's an effective one, I don't know. But it exists. There is Sedgemoor Witch. I haven't been super disappointed by Sedgemoor Witch in the past, I guess. But I've got a Fading Hope and 2 Parasitic Grasps to bring in against... I've got 2 Fading Hopes and 2 Parasitic Grasps to bring in against aggressive decks at the moment. And in all honesty, unless I end up cutting the Lear plan, Disdainful Strokes are probably the only thing I want to bring out against Mono White. So I don't actually think I have room for Sedgemoor Witch in those matchups currently. Hi, Chris. After a quick glance at this list, I don't think you should be playing this. Looks too good against mono green and can't have that. Ah, you noticed the objective, did you? Is Jwari Disruption a consideration? Yes, but I am going to add that in at the mana-based stage of things, I think. Where's all my excellent mid-range card advantage tools, huh? Where did all of those things go? Why can't I find them? Do I have the ability to play some kind of just draw a billion cards card? Is that an option? I suppose I could just play like 2 Celestus and not be embarrassed by that anymore. There's not really the threat that your opponent just plays Unexpected Windfall on 4. Maybe Celestus is actually a good card now? Sedgemoor and Poppet Stitcher in the last cube were incredible, so surely they're good here in Standard? Maybe. Iymrith. Ooh. I actually probably dig that a lot. I guess I was only looking at 4 and 5 drops. Heck, maybe Iymrith is a better alternative to Leer. Or I guess could be in addition to Leer. It's certainly a nice card to have against dragons. Not the best thing in the world against a... Well, I guess it's not a bad thing against a Goldspan Dragon. If you play it in advance of the Goldspan Dragon. Alright, alright. Hey Chris, what are your thoughts on the rebalance to Fairy? My initial reaction is I can't imagine playing the 4 mana Teferi. But that might mean that instead of being just like an efficient piece of tempo that gains life, slows them down, and replaces itself, and then also has a bunch of other fringe benefits, maybe instead it just turns into a card that you board in as a hate piece against matchups that can't combo off with Teferi in play. I saw people talking about like, well, maybe it'll be a mirror match breaking card, and I can't imagine any control mirror where trying to tap out for a 4-drop that inconveniences your opponent is supposed to be your game plan, when you could just put Mystical Dispute in your sideboard instead. Generally, that's just way more reliable, because the question isn't what does Teferi do when it's in play, the question is how do you resolve Teferi? And that was a much easier thing to do when you could play it as a 3-drop, and your opponent's list of adequate answers to that was kind of narrow, and where starting on turn 4 you could threaten to start playing it with Mystical Dispute backup, and then your opponent's really inconvenienced. Every mana cost you add to a card is not quite exponentially more than the mana before it, but a good deal. Each increment of mana is a lot more than the increment of mana before it in terms of how much it actually slows down or weakens a card. Most obvious way to say that is the difference between a card costing 1 mana or 0 mana is really, really, really big, much bigger than the difference between a card costing 1 mana or 2 mana. They said when they banned Divide that they wanted blue control players to have to choose what they wanted to answer rather than having a universally effective answer, judging by the main deck strokes. Looks like that goal was achieved. Yeah, I mean, that's a very nice way of phrasing it. The reality is that banning Divide means that instead of having a good card, blue players have to choose between multiple different bad cards. And I'm being cheeky, but I don't think that that's a bad thing. But that is essentially what's going on. Divide was a very good card, and now we have to choose between not great cards instead. I would not have known how to spell Iymrith. Luckily for me, I spend a lot of my day job typing card names, putting them on orders, searching up inventory numbers, searching up pricing data. So I type a lot of Magic card names on a daily basis. The one I can't do, I've never been able to do, is Azorius. I can't stop myself. I type the U every time, and that's not right. I think it's just like Azorius, something like that. I still don't know which one's right. Azorius, no O, just the U. What's my day job? I manage inventory, pricing, and purchasing for cards online and in-store at a local game store in Vancouver, Washington. I enjoy it. It's very fun. I like getting to be around nerds. It's satisfying. Alright, I need 2 more cards for the sideboard, and I'm not actually sure what that's supposed to be. I guess maybe I want stuff to fight dragons? What's a card that's good against Goldspan Dragon and Egg and And Malevolent Hermit. I mean, I guess partially that's Iymrith. We have 2 Iymriths. What? No. Select. There we go. More copies of Soul Shatter. I'm not sure that expensive removal spells are great against Hermit. Similarly, I mean, I guess Essence Scatter isn't bad, but not being an answer to Egg and Hermit's kind of a problem, I think. I could just play Infernal Grasp, I guess. I'm not terribly enthusiastic about that. Bloodchief? I could try playing Bloodchief instead of Fading Hope, I guess? Huh. Alright, I'm willing to give that a shot. I'm planning on playing any number of creature lands. Probably 1 Hall of the Storm Giants and 1 Hive of the Eye Tyrant would be my guess. Not a fan of targeting dragon. They're going to be good at stopping it again. Do you mean Goldspan Dragon? Because I agree with that. It's not my primary plan to target Goldspan Dragon if I can help it. But Vanishing Verse hitting Goldspan Dragon is nice in a pinch. The main problem with Soul Shatter is mostly that 3 mana to remove stuff is a lot of mana to remove stuff. That's kind of why I feel like I'm sort of desperate to be on the 3 Disdainful Stroke plans. But I don't know that playing more counter spells or more expensive spells is actually good against Goldspan Dragon if they wind up on a Hermit plan. And if I don't have enough removal spells that can hit Hermit early. Come to think of it, do we have access to any good playable exile-based removal that could hit Hermit? Admittedly, hitting Hermit with exile-based removal isn't actually that easy, unless it's something very cheap like Spike Field, because they can sack it in response. I guess I could play like 2 Syncopates. That's probably not good against Hermit, but maybe? I don't know. I could try to play Syncopates instead of Leers, instead of Consider. Infernal Grasp probably is what I have to play, would be my guess. And I wind up not excited about that. But I'm not sure I have real alternatives at the moment. The trouble with Siphon Insight, I think, is that I don't feel like it has synergy with Leer, because it tends to be vulnerable to Go Blank. And if I'm going to play more card advantage than Leer and Memory Deluge and Celestus, then I want it to be something that is the type of card advantage that is well positioned against Memory Deluge, or against Go Blank. Is Doomscar even good? Not having Doomscar makes your mana a lot better. And it might be the Doomscar isn't good. We might just not want to play a Doomscar. We could just like try to play Infernal Grasp instead. The trouble is, I feel like not having Doomscar leaves us pretty nervous against Mono Green, where we do still have to answer maybe Bloodchief's Thirst and Hullbreaker Horror are enough answers to Wrenn and 7 tokens. What about Purge instead of Doomscar? I don't believe Purge is the 3 mana board wipe, right? Yeah, that's not legal in Standard. That one's an Alchemy only card, which gets very confusing these days, to be honest. Path of Peril. Oh. That is a card. You're right. Alright, I'm willing to try that out. I don't know if it's good, but... that's interesting. Crippling Fear I don't really like because it falls into the same problem with Meathook Massacre as... Meathook Massacre of not being great against mono-green threats. Alright. Well, if I rounded things out with 2 Infernal Grasp against dragons, I guess 2 Jacob Hawkins is sort of a plan against midrange. So against midrange, I'm probably boarding in like the Sorin, the 2 Jacobs, the Iymriths, and maybe Go Blanks. I mean, it's... Alright, we got a game plan. We do have a game plan. How many answers to Chariot do I have? I have Edgar, Iymrith, Sword of Horror, Vanishing Verse, Grasp, Thirst, and Path of Peril never answer it. Soul Shatter kind of does. I guess I have 3 Disdainful Strokes. That's kind of a help. Celestus and no Fading Hope seems questionable, though. Probably have to still main deck some Fading Hopes, huh? Maybe 1? Is 1 Fading Hope enough? Or am I supposed to cut a Celestus and just play 2 Fading Hopes? Let's start with this. No, I want to play 2 Celestus because I think all of my complaints about the Celestus originated from the play patterns against Izzet, and I don't know if 2 Celestus is correct. I do think that I am supposed to play 2 Celestus for the educational value of it, if nothing else. Bum, 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 bum. Alright, let's cut a Fading Hope then from the sideboard and put in another Thirst into the sideboard. I think that's my plan. And we're gonna snag non-basics, lands. We want what? How many Jwari Disruptions if we're only playing 27 lands? I should probably be playing 1 more land than this. I guess I don't super need to consider if the Celestus is sort of the game plan for fueling Lear. So let's play 1 Hall, 1 Hive, 4 Pathways, 4 Shipwreck Marsh, 4 Pathways, 4 Deserted Beach. That was white and blue and black, so I need white and black. Oh, up here. White, black Pathways, white, black Sanctums. Wow, that fills up a mana base fast. I don't even have room for basics, and I probably need to play basics. What about Shadow's Verdict in the sideboard? What matchups do we view that for right now? Mono green? Does hit most of the creatures that aren't 4 drops, I guess. Mono white. I wonder how much mono white's going to be a deck. But I suspect Parasitic Grasp and Vanishing Verses are probably my answers there. I kind of feel like between Parasitic Grasp, Sorin, Edgar, probably not Edgar actually, and Iymrith, I think I've actually got a game plan against mono white already. It's hard for 5 mana board wipes to be super well positioned right now. I think. Meathook Massacre is a little different because it gains a life. But even that, I'm not sure if I'm super excited about. We'll see. Okay, so what are we cutting land-wise? If I were to save this and go and look back at the Esper mana base, how did that function in Alchemy? It was not as many white-black pathways. I guess that tracks. Not as many white-black pathways by 3. Played 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 18, 20, 24, 28 lands. I think that's what I'm playing. Oh no, it played 30, huh? With the Seagates, but Seagate wasn't really a land. I mean, it was, but it wasn't. Did I count that right? 5, 10, 18, 20, 24, 28. Well, 28's more or less what I think I want to replicate here. Although we do need more blue or more white sources with Edgar. So let's say plains, island, swamp. With all the Jwari Disruptions, I think maybe I want to split Brightclimb and Hengegate. Wouldn't run a plains. I'm suspicious I do need to run the plains with Edgar. If that's supposed to be part of my plan against mono green. If I need to have that card on curve. Then again, I suppose the logic behind a plains is that it's effective if you fetch it when the opponent hits you with the Field of Ruin. And I don't care about my white cards in a matchup where my opponent's playing Field of Ruin. Are these 6 white cards even worth splashing? Why are we not just a mirror? I feel like Vanishing Verse and Edgar are both pretty critical against mono green. I don't know if I could build a Dimir deck that had a chance against mono green. Arbitrage Garage, thanks for the follow. Glad you're enjoying the stream. And also, Iymrith. Iymrith? Maybe Iymrith. 17 minutes ago, which means I missed it. Sorry about that. But I'm glad you're enjoying the stream too. Karsten's article is at 10 to 11 sources for Edgar. Did Frank Karsten... Oh, or do you mean the old one, and not specifically about Edgar? So we're at 4, 8, 10-ish. Pathways would prefer not to be on white early, so I'd call them half generously. And Celestus, so we're close to 10 to 11. So I guess that kind of works. All right, I would call this functional. Let's give it some test runs and see where it goes. I don't feel like it's anywhere close to tuned, but it's a starting point.